Lewis Hamilton travels to Austria to put pen to paper with Red Bull. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Lewis Hamilton has ignited a storm unlike anything seen in recent Formula One memory. In a move so secretive that it eluded not only the press but also key figures within the paddock, Hamilton boarded a private jet and landed just outside Salzburg, Austria. Not for leisure, not for media obligations, but for a high-stakes meeting at a confidential Red Bull Racing annex few even knew existed. This secluded compound, designed to keep even the most inquisitive insiders in the dark, became the epicenter of what may be the most seismic development in the modern history of motorsport. Hidden beneath layers of operational camouflage, this facility saw Hamilton walk in alone, unaccompanied by management, and face-to-face with Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, and a small cadre of Red Bull GmbH legal advisors. What followed, according to those briefed on the outcome, was not a simple conversation, it was a strategic summit. Over 5 intense hours, Hamilton and Red Bull Senior Brain Trust dissected, negotiated, and shaped a proposal that, if executed on May 22 as currently expected, will not only shatter financial records but redraw the battle lines of the sport itself. This isn't just a contract. It's a blueprint for a new era, an era in which Hamilton doesn't merely drive. He architects, influences, and potentially redefines what a modern F1 driver can be. Sources indicate the deal will extend far beyond the staggering $70 million plus annual salary, figures that will dwarf existing agreements across the grid. The package includes equity stakes in Red Bull Technologies, a voice in the conceptual development of their post-2025 powertrain projects, and a formal advisory role within Red Bull Advanced Technologies. It's not just a seat at the table, it's a controlling interest in the kitchen. Hamilton is being brought in as more than just an athlete. He's being positioned as a future force within the engineering and innovation core of the Red Bull empire. His influence will stretch far beyond his time behind the wheel. This deal is a fusion of present talent and future vision. Back in Brackley, the news detonated like a bomb. Toto Wolff, blindsided by the leak, reportedly found out through an encrypted message passed along by a trusted informant inside the F1 Commission. At first, he dismissed it as a negotiating tactic, another classic maneuver by Hamilton's camp to extract final leverage during renewal talks. But reality set in fast. When multiple Red Bull-linked engineers began to quietly confirm the meeting's authenticity, Wolff's reaction went from disbelief to desperation. Insiders say he attempted to reach Hamilton repeatedly. 4 calls. 3 ignored. The 4th, finally answered, led to a conversation that insiders are describing as emotionally devastating. According to those with knowledge of the exchange, Toto began with a simple, bitter question. So this is real? You're actually leaving? The tone was not angry, but wounded. Hamilton, calm and unsentimental, responded with words that cut through a decade of shared triumphs. You stopped listening. They didn't. I wanted evolution, vision. Red Bull was ready to move. You were ready to wait. That line has reportedly echoed across every floor at Mercedes HQ. Wolff attempted to remind him of their empire, of their 8 Constructors' Championships, of the records that may never be broken. He even referenced their darkest days, Abu Dhabi 2021, and how they had vowed to return together. But Hamilton, far from shaken, reportedly responded with almost surgical clarity, I'm not running from the past. I'm chasing the future. You're still looking backward. I can't afford to. This wasn't a betrayal. This was a divergence. Hamilton has spent years signaling a desire for influence beyond driving, a legacy that transcends trophies. Red Bull, apparently, was the only team prepared to offer him the platform, the authority, and the technological access to make that happen. This is not just about beating Verstappen or reclaiming title number 8. This is about establishing a post-racing empire, where Hamilton the racer becomes Hamilton the innovator, the strategist, the executive force. At Mercedes, the ripple effects are just beginning. George Russell, once the unquestioned successor, now finds himself in an awkward limbo. Does the team pivot to build around him? Or do they look outward, eyeing a potential generational replacement for Hamilton? Rumors have already begun swirling about approaches to Lando Norris, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, and even an early release deal for Charles Leclerc, though Ferrari insiders remain skeptical. Meanwhile, within Red Bull's inner sanctum, the atmosphere is described as electrified. Max Verstappen, although currently dominant, has reportedly voiced concern about the shift in power dynamics. Insiders suggest the Dutchman wasn't fully informed of the Hamilton discussions until they were already near completion. Tension is inevitable. 2 alpha drivers. 1 team. 1 garage. 1 future. The countdown to potential friction has already begun. How Red Bull manages this will define not only the fate of the next few seasons, but the legacy of both drivers. And what of the fans? The Hamilton faithful are already divided. Some feel betrayed by his decision to join his longtime rival. Others see it as the boldest chapter in his career, a refusal to fade, a refusal to settle. This isn't just a transfer. It's a transformation. Hamilton is not walking away from Mercedes out of bitterness. He's leaping toward the one thing he values most: momentum. Come May 22nd, if the ink dries and the signatures are laid down, Formula may first witness the most volatile, thrilling, and disruptive alliance in modern history. The 7-time world champion, the face of resistance, and the icon of change will join forces with a team that once humiliated him, beat him, and dominated his twilight years. And instead of fighting from opposite corners, they'll be side by side, plotting their next conquest, rewriting their legacies, and maybe, just maybe, reshaping the soul of Formula One itself. The reaction from Charles Leclerc was nothing short of seismic. When the news broke, first as a whisper in the paddock, then as an undeniable fact, that Lewis Hamilton had signed with Red Bull, it didn't merely surprise him. It shook him. He had been in Monaco, preparing for the next race weekend with his inner circle, when a discreet message popped up on his encrypted phone line. Hamilton. Confirmed. Red Bull. The words sat there like a punch to the chest. Leclerc read them once, twice, 3 times. He stood up, walked to the window, stared out in silence, and then turned around and said, "Tell me that's a mistake. Please. Tell me someone's messing with me." But there were no denials. No corrections. It was real. Those present say Leclerc didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. He just sat down slowly, laced his fingers together, and muttered, "This changes the whole grid." He wasn't wrong. A move of this magnitude was bigger than a mere transfer. It was a tectonic shift. "Max is the king of that castle," Leclerc finally said, breaking the silence. "And now Lewis is moving in? That's a civil war waiting to happen." Unable to shake the weight of what he just learned, Leclerc reached out to Hamilton himself later that night, not out of curiosity, but necessity. He needed answers straight from the source. The FaceTime call began with cordial small talk, but it didn't take long before the underlying tension surfaced. "Lewis, are you sure about this?" Charles asked. "Red Bull is Max's fortress. Everything is built around him, from the car's characteristics to the garage's rhythm. They'll never let you take control." Hamilton didn't flinch. His tone was calm, but resolute. "I'm not asking for control," he replied. "I'm taking it. You've seen what I've done with less." Charles leaned in, visibly trying to assess whether this was confidence or delusion. "This isn't like 2013, he said, referencing Hamilton's controversial Mercedes move over a decade ago. "Red Bull isn't rebuilding, they're dominating. You're entering the lion's den, not a blank canvas." Hamilton smiled faintly. "Then I guess it's time to see who really leads the pride." Elsewhere, the tremors were being felt just as intensely, if not more so, in Maranello. Ferrari team principal Frédéric Vasseur was in the middle of a logistics meeting when the confirmation was forwarded to him. He read the headline once and immediately asked for the room to be cleared. For months, years even, he had been quietly nurturing a fantasy that, should Mercedes fall into decline, Ferrari could offer Hamilton a final masterpiece to sign his legacy. The red suit, the tifosi, the dream finish. That fantasy just evaporated. One insider described Vasseur's mood as internally explosive. To the outside world, he would appear composed. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. "This isn't just a power shift," he told his technical staff later that day. "This is Red Bull placing a nuclear warhead next to the paddock." What followed was a flurry of emergency meetings. First with Elkan, then with the performance directors, then with the communications team. The mission: redefine Ferrari's strategy from long-term patience to immediate aggression. That night, a document labeled Operation Contingency was circulated internally, outlining 3 possible responses. Initiate talks with McLaren for a preemptive strike on Lando Norris. reapproach Carlos Sainz with an unconventional offer to retain his services as a tactical weapon, or in a last-ditch effort to turn public sentiment, explore the shocking possibility of bringing back a legendary name, Vettel or even Alonso, as a short-term disruptor. The rationale wasn't just performance-based. It was psychological warfare. If Red Bull had Hamilton, Ferrari needed a countermove that would electrify the headlines, energize their fanbase, and destabilize the competition. This is no longer about building for the future, Vasseur reportedly said. This is about survival in a battlefield redefined by shock. Within the Red Bull camp, sources suggest the atmosphere is equal parts excitement and apprehension. Max Verstappen, while publicly welcoming the challenge, has allegedly requested multiple private meetings with team principal Christian Horner to understand how authority will be balanced in 2026. One insider described Max's concern not as fear, but as strategic defense. Verstappen is not used to sharing the spotlight, nor the garage. And Hamilton is not the kind of driver to play second fiddle. Engineers have been instructed to create entirely separate data tracks for both drivers, with additional layers of confidentiality, a rare move in a team that prides itself on collaborative development. The move signals something deeper. Red Bull is already anticipating internal turbulence. And the paddock knows it. Back in Monaco, Leclerc has turned his reaction inward. Friends describe him as unusually focused, even withdrawn. He has reportedly cancelled several media commitments, extended his simulator hours, and begun analyzing Hamilton's previous seasons to identify psychological and strategic patterns. He's not afraid, a close confidant said, but he's realized the game has changed. Forever. The dominoes are only beginning to fall. Rumors swirl of Mercedes fast-tracking teenage sensation Kimi Antonelli to the big leagues, desperate to keep relevance. Alpine, meanwhile, is considering a full reset of its driver lineup, betting that the chaos among the top teams could create a brief vacuum in which they might surge forward. Even Aston Martin, who had quietly been building for long-term competitiveness, is now revisiting its strategic roadmap after losing hope of ever-luring Hamilton. The sport hasn't felt this volatile since the Rosberg-Hamilton Civil War. But this time, the stakes are even higher. Because now, the power struggle isn't just between teammates. It's between dynasties. While the motorsport world clings to the edge of its seat, attempting to decipher what has become the most cryptic development in modern Formula One history, Red Bull Racing has continued to fan the flames of confusion by saying absolutely nothing. Not a press release. Not a whispered word from Christian Horner. Not even one of Helmut Marko's trademark provocative soundbites. For a team that usually thrives on sharp comebacks and headline-grabbing confidence, their sudden retreat into complete radio silence has only heightened the sense that something seismic is unfolding behind the scenes. The calm was shattered not with words, but with a visual blow that felt like a thunderclap. Out of the blue, Red Bull's dormant social media channels flickered back to life after an unexplained blackout that lasted just under 7 hours. When their accounts finally broke the silence, it wasn't with a race highlight or a celebratory post. Instead, a stark minimalistic image appeared across all platforms, an unoccupied driver's suit hanging on a wall inside the team's ultramodern Milton Keynes facility. The caption? Merely a date, May 22, 25. No emojis. No context. Just a timestamp. The online reaction was immediate and explosive. Conspiracy theories multiplied by the second. TikTok creators dissected the image pixel by pixel. Twitter erupted with a chaos only F1 fans can produce, with hashtags like #RedBullShock, #HamiltonSwitch, and #the chair dominating trending charts across multiple countries. The Formula One subreddit became a war zone of screenshots, speculative essays, and leaked voice notes from people claiming to have sources close to the situation. No one knew for sure what it meant, but everyone felt it was huge. Then came the next tremor. Lewis Hamilton had been spotted. Not on a track. Not at a press conference. But at an airport in Vienna, clad entirely in black, oversized hoodie, dark shades, designer boots, and signature noise-canceling headphones. He didn't speak. He didn't even glance at the reporters yelling questions his way. But the internet zeroed in on one tiny detail that sent shockwaves across the F1 community. His phone lock screen featured a stylized graphic of a Red Bull RB20 speeding through Suzuka Circuit. The image looked professionally rendered, not something you'd find in a casual Google search. Was it fan art? A teaser? Or had Hamilton, master of calculated moves and quiet statements, Just declared war with nothing but a scream? Within hours, Mercedes was under siege from media inquiries. The team's comms division issued a vague statement urging fans to respect driver privacy and avoid premature assumptions, which only added gasoline to the fire. Internally, whispers suggested that a senior engineer broke down in tears during a strategy meeting, while an unverified audio leak from the Mercedes war room featured someone, reportedly Toto, saying, "If this is true, we've lost him forever." The credibility of the clip was questionable, but the emotional weight it carried was very real. Meanwhile, Red Bull's offices remained locked tight. Security reportedly increased at their HQ, with visitors turned away at the gates. Drones were spotted hovering nearby, trying to capture glimpses through the upper floor windows. The only visible change was a small placard near the main entrance that had been quietly removed. It used to read "Home of the Champion." Now it was just an empty space on the wall. Fans weren't content to wait. Amateur sleuths cross-referenced flight patterns, hotel bookings, and Instagram story geotags. One user on X claimed Hamilton's private jet had landed in Nice, just a 25-minute chopper ride from Monte Carlo. Another swore they saw Angela Cullen, Hamilton's former performance coach, speaking with a Red Bull junior engineer at a London coffee shop 3 days ago. Every interaction, every sighting, every whisper was being analyzed, repackaged, and amplified 1,000-fold. Even among the paddock elite, tensions were bubbling. Lando Norris, when asked about the social media frenzy, gave a cryptic smile and said, "All I'll say is, nothing surprises me anymore." Fernando Alonso, on the other hand, raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Some people think they know the future. I've already seen it." The cryptic nature of their responses only fueled the storm further. Behind the scenes, some sources insisted the Hamilton Red Bull rumor was a decoy, part of a grander scheme involving Verstappen's potential exit, possibly to Ferrari or even Aston Martin. One high-ranking executive, speaking on the condition of anonymity, claimed that Red Bull's leadership is no longer aligned internally. There's a civil war brewing between their Austrian boardroom and their UK operation. Whether that's truth or myth remains to be seen, but it's no secret that tensions between Horner and Marko have grown frostier in recent months. And then there's Max Verstappen. The reigning champion has remained completely out of sight, reportedly taking a break from media obligations. His last public appearance was 3 days ago, leaving a private gym in Monaco. But fans noticed a strange coincidence. The playlist he was listening to, gleaned from a connected Bluetooth speaker spotted nearby, featured a song titled "Betrayal" by Trippie Redd. Coincidence? Maybe. But in this narrative-obsessed sport, there are no throwaway details. Everything is a clue. Everything is fuel. Sponsors are starting to feel the tremors. Oracle is said to be re-evaluating their branding strategy with Red Bull, while rumors swirl that Petronas, the longtime partner of Mercedes, has begun discreet talks with Aston Martin. The entire financial ecosystem of F1 seems to be bracing for a paradigm shift. Teams are already preparing for media fallout, crafting statements they may or may not need depending on what happens on that mysterious Thursday. With the date drawing closer, the air feels heavier. The silence from all key players, Red Bull, Mercedes, Hamilton, Verstappen, is louder than any announcement. And as that day looms on the calendar like a final lap with no fuel, fans are left with nothing but questions, theories, and an overwhelming sense that the sport is about to turn a corner it can't come back from. Whatever happens on the 22nd of May, it won't be forgotten. It will be a day written not just in the annals of Formula One, but etched into the psyche of every fan, driver, executive, and engineer. Because if Lewis Hamilton, the face of a generation, is truly switching to Red Bull, or causing Verstappen to walk away, then the sport isn't just shifting. It's detonating. Whispers turn into roars inside the F1 paddock as the sport teeters on the edge of one of its most outrageous and paradigm-shifting moments in modern memory. Beneath the surface of every team briefing, media interview, and corporate handshake, one question looms larger than tire degradation or DRS zones. Is Lewis Hamilton truly preparing to defect to Red Bull Racing? Not just as a statement, not just for show, but as a full-fledged contender to challenge the very driver who has ruled this era with cold precision and merciless pace, Max Verstappen. For months, observers scoffed at the idea. A Hamilton-Verstappen pairing seemed like a fever dream concocted by overzealous content creators desperate for clicks. But the illusion has begun to feel disturbingly tangible. High-level conversations behind locked doors. Strategic silence from both Mercedes and Red Bull. Cryptic comments from Horner and Wolff. Glimpses of Hamilton speaking privately with Adrian Newey. None of it adds up, unless you believe that something seismic is in motion, something that could upend the F1 power structure as we know it. The thought of Lewis Hamilton, statistically the greatest of all time, aligning with Red Bull, the very organization that has long been his philosophical and competitive opposite, is almost unthinkable. Yet here we are, with insiders from both camps no longer denying the possibility but carefully dancing around it. Sources close to both teams report a mutual interest. Not a casual flirtation, but concrete dialogue. And not about 2025, but for the new regulatory era beginning in 2026, when engine architecture and chassis design reset the playing field. That's the true key, 2026. With sweeping power unit changes and aerodynamic shifts on the horizon, both Red Bull and Mercedes are bracing for a total transformation. Hamilton, nearing the final chapters of his storied career, knows he has perhaps one last window to shape his legacy in ways no other driver can. And what better way to write that chapter than by stepping into enemy territory and proving, on equal footing, that he can still reign supreme. It's a gamble of colossal proportions. Hamilton wouldn't just be switching teams. He'd be entering Verstappen's house. A team engineered to suit Max's every need. A pit wall that speaks his language. A simulator environment built around his feedback loops. Red Bull Racing isn't just Verstappen's employer, it's his ecosystem. To enter that space would require more than just speed. It would demand psychological warfare, political finesse, and the kind of mental steel only someone like Lewis could even consider bringing to the table. The consequences would be unprecedented. Formula One has seen rivalries: Prost versus Senna, Alonso versus Hamilton, Rosberg versus Hamilton. But this would be different. It wouldn't be a rivalry born from within a team. It would be a legacy collision, a generational showdown, staged from day one under the most intense media spotlight imaginable. Every practice session would be dissected. Every team radio message would trend globally. Every podium interaction would be scrutinized like a political summit. What's perhaps most astonishing is that Red Bull is reportedly open to this. Not because they doubt Verstappen, but because they crave evolution. With the long-term future of Newey still uncertain, and the commercial side of F1 hungry for more firepower, Red Bull might view the arrival of Hamilton not as a threat, but as a tactical escalation. Verstappen's dominance is unparalleled, but even dynasties can grow stale in the eyes of sponsors, viewers, and broadcasters. Hamilton's arrival would inject a new kind of electricity, a new dynamic that even Verstappen himself might quietly relish. He's never had a true equal in the same garage. He's never had to face down a driver who carries as much historical weight and public loyalty as Lewis. And let's not ignore the potential marketing explosion. Two of the most recognizable names in motorsport. Tens of millions of followers. Entire nations behind them. The Lewis versus Max saga, once marred by controversy, could be reborn as sport's most bankable story. It's the kind of rivalry that could reignite global F1 fandom in places where viewership has plateaued. It's the kind of narrative that transcends racing lines and lap times. Back at Mercedes, the silence is telling. The team has made no bold statements about long-term continuity. Wolff has spoken of exploring all options. George Russell, the heir apparent, continues to play the part of loyal no. Too, while clearly eyeing the day when he becomes the team's centerpiece. If Hamilton leaves, Mercedes will be forced into reinvention. And in that chaos, Red Bull could seize even more power, unless Hamilton disrupts them from the inside. Then there's the wild card, Ferrari. The Scuderia has reportedly monitored the situation closely, even reaching out to Hamilton's management. Some believe they could still make a late play, perhaps hoping to pair Lewis with Charles Leclerc or even position him as a bridge to a post-Leclerc era. But the reality is, Ferrari's internal confusion and lack of clear vision make them a less attractive destination for someone of Hamilton's ambition. Red Bull, in contrast, offers a shot at history. So the pressure mounts. The clock ticks. May 22nd, a date some insiders believe has been chosen specifically for its symbolic weight, looms ever closer. And though no pen has yet touched paper, publicly at least, the mood across the paddock has shifted. You can feel it in the silence of Toto Wolff's press answers. You can hear it in the tremble of Horner's carefully rehearsed lines. You can sense it in the eyes of Verstappen, who no longer shrugs off the question when asked if he'd welcome Hamilton as a teammate. Because he knows. They all know. If Lewis Hamilton crosses the threshold and dons Red Bull Red, the sport will plunge into an entirely new chapter, one governed not by regulations or tire strategies, but by pride, ego, vengeance, and legacy. One where every corner, every sector, every finish line carries the weight of two titans colliding for supremacy. The paddock waits, breath held, as the storm clouds gather.